Parents, as I start this message today, let me just say to you that today I want to apologize. Because you're about to have some awkward conversations with your children this afternoon. It's going to be very good for you to have these conversations because they're not really awkward. This is the principle of firsts. The principle of firsts says that wherever you hear information about a particular topic first, that will become the cornerstone of that topic until more information is put in there and it starts to overflow. And young people hear the information, get their information about sex from pornography. Not from their parents, not from a sex education at school, but from pornography. That this scary, ridiculously perverted industry is shaping our young people, and some people here have been shaped by that very industry. We're now told, and this stat is a couple of years old. I think it's actually a little bit less now, but is in age, and I'll tell you what I mean when I say this stat, that it is believed that a person is exposed to pornography as early as 11 years old. That's their first exposure. I believe it's a little bit less now because of, and that's a 2 or 3 year old stat, but because of the onset of technology in regards to phones and iPads and things like that, devices that are so easily accessible, where children who might search innocent things like girls, or they might search clothing, or they might search just random things, and sure enough, the third or fourth search is a pornographic website. And we believe that certain search engines can be filtered, and they can be, but they're not all 100% accurate. And so what happens is we've got these bunch of young people who are being raised through this industry that's perverted what God has created. We're told that men, young men, that they're so addicted to pornography that the addiction causes them to have less empathy for women. It causes them to become more likely to become sex offenders, and lifelong ones at that. It causes them to have less capacity to be able to put together the building blocks of life. As a matter of fact, it starts to rewire their brain now. We know now that it rewires their brain so much that they get more of a reward sensor in their brain is activated from fake people that they view on screen than real people and real connections in real life. And so the reward structure of a brain is so rewired and so decimated by pornography that they don't know how to derive satisfaction from having a meaningful connection with a human being, but they do know and constantly run back to that fake connection with a screen. And so these are the reasons why we need to be talking about this. These are the reasons why we need to bring up this topic. And the title of my message today is called "Who Cares About Sex?" Who cares about sex? Funnily enough, the answer to that question is everyone. Okay, don't act all holy and Christian on me now, like you didn't care about sex at all, ever, in your entire life, ever. Like you never thought about it, especially men here. Every second of every moment of every day, acting all holy on me now. I don't want you to be all over-sanctified. I want you to be real today, okay? What I want to say today is to bring it up so that our young people and our married people can understand what sex really is, what it does, how it affects us, and then what God designed for it to be. The other person that cares about sex a lot is God. God probably cares more about sex than all of us in this room put together. Why? Because He created it. Have you ever wondered, and I don't know if your brain works like this, but have you ever wondered, why didn't God just make us procreate using eggs? The wife pops the egg out, the guy has to sit on it. What? Well, like, just think that through for a minute. Why why wasn't God designing it like that? There was no pleasure in it. It's just an egg pops out. You sit on it for 3 weeks, 10 weeks, 1 year, whatever God decided at the time, and that's what you end up doing. Why did it have to have this what sex is now? Why did it have this pleasure center? What was the idea behind this? And when you look at it in that light, then you've got to see that whatever God designs, there is always a purpose and a boundary. Everything that God designs has a purpose and boundaries. Everything. For instance, God designed us to eat food. The purpose of food is for nutrition for our bodies, but there are boundaries to food, like don't eat too much. Eat what's good for your body. Don't eat a lot of the bad stuff. Find out what it is. There are boundaries to food. You don't sit there and gorge on food, or you don't stop eating food. There are boundaries to food that we've got to live in. Recreation. And we all love to go to sports and watch sports or play sports or go to movies or go on holidays. But if you did that year in, year out and just had recreation, some of us like, oh, that would be amazing if I just had a holiday for 2 years. Yeah, actually, you'd probably get bored out of your brain in the first 3 to 6 months. Because we're not designed to just sit there, lay on the beach like a fat whale. That's not what we're designed to do. We're designed to do things. We're designed to create. We're designed to make things happen and achieve. We're designed to look after. We're designed to be in interaction with each other. That's what we're designed to do. Like I said last week, if you weren't here last week, please watch the messages. Share them on YouTube. Whatever you need to do, share them out there to get them out there because the last week's message, the two big things I wanted to bring out was marriage is not the goal of a single person. Wholeness is the goal of a single person, and that includes you in marriage, okay? Because you are an individual, single person within a marriage unit, and so you need wholeness as much as anyone does, but it'd be good to have it when you're single. Start there. Be whole in what God has created you to be whole. So watch that. But in saying that, recreation is something that we have about. It's great to have recreation because we recreate ourselves, we get re-energized, but there are boundaries to it. How you do it, where you do it, with whom you do it. Obviously, there are boundaries to that. Thoughts is another one. We all have thoughts. Our thought life, our mindsets. But there are boundaries. What's the purpose of that? Well, it teaches us how to look at our worldview, how to interact with the world, how to process what information we're getting through our thoughts and so through our senses. And so thoughts help us, but the boundary of thoughts are you can't sit in negative thought process for long periods of time. We all know what happens. We all know the negative impact of that thought, that negative thought processes, and we get into anxiety and depression and worse. And so there are boundaries beside what we do. The whole of the earth has got a purpose and a boundary. The purpose is to sustain life. The boundary is it has to stay within a very tiny zone in the galaxy for any life to be sustained on this planet. There are boundaries. Very, very, very strict boundaries for whatever God creates. But what man has done is we've tried to remove all of the boundaries and remove the purpose of what sex is. What man has done, what we have done as a society, is we've taken sex and relegated it down to its lowest common denominator, which is physical. We have said it is nothing more than just a physical act of pleasure for mankind. We have said that sex is nothing more than a physical act of pleasure for mankind. And therefore, go and do it with whomever you want, whenever you want, however you want. And this becomes the ideology that goes out there. In church world, we've made it so taboo that let's not talk about sex. I mean, you talk about sex. I've been talking about sex from the platform for about 12 years now. Now, today, most people aren't too shocked by it. 12 years ago, it was a shock that Pastor George mentioned sex from the platform. How dare you bring up sex and talk about sex for a whole message? Generally, the ones that got really upset with it are the ones that had a problem with it. The reason we don't want to talk about it is because we think it's only meant for the marriage bed. Yeah, exactly. But the reason why we don't talk about it is because we're too afraid of what it really is. We don't want to talk about it because it can be embarrassing. And I say to you parents, don't hold back from talking to your children over the coming days and weeks, because they need to hear about it from you. They need to hear about it from us, not from their little dirty-minded friend or the porno website or their liberal teacher who decides to tell them that, yeah, you can live any life you want. It's okay as long as you don't hurt anyone, not realizing what they're actually saying. And so we relegate sex down to its physical form as a society. And so therefore, basically, go and do what animals do. There are songs about it. You and me, baby, we ain't nothing but mammals. So let's do it like they do on the Discovery Channel. That's a song. I didn't just make that up. I'm not like I'm busting out a rhyme. Okay. And so it's a song that became so big, and there are many songs like that. As a matter of fact, I turn on the radio now and I'm mesmerized, but how many songs are about sex? Bump and grind and sideways and leftways and bend over and bend back and all these weird positions about sex. And our young people are going, I say to our young people, do you understand what you're listening to? I love the beat. No, forget the beat. Forget the beat. Get the instrumental version if you love the beat then. What's really happening is the words are going into your subconscious. And when the words get in there, maybe today it doesn't affect you, maybe tomorrow it doesn't affect you, maybe in a year's time it doesn't affect you, but I can tell you right now that what's happening is you're becoming less and less and less and less sensitive to these things, and you're becoming more seared in your heart, so that now sex and relationships are so skewed and so twisted because of these songs and these magazines and these books and these novels and these movies. It's become so twisted that becomes normal to you. See, what I say to young people is, and to all of us really, there's this thing called creep. I call it creep. I'm not talking about your neighbor, okay? There's this thing called creep. I call it creep because what it means is you might start off somewhere now in a particular value system, but after you're exposed a little bit, and exposed a little bit more to something different, and exposed a little bit more, and a little bit, just a little bit each week, a little bit each day, a little bit each week, it's a different value to what you normally do. You don't realize that you've gone off course so much, and now what is normal to you would have been reprehensible a year ago. You're so used to it now. Like young girls, let's say, young guys, it's no, I've got a value system that I'm not going to expose my body to people from the opposite sex. I'm not going to walk around half naked, right? This is not what I'm going to do. And then, a particular top, and your friend buys you the top, or a particular shorts, and different types of clothing, and then at the beach, and now you're at the beach in your bikinis, and you're jumping on your friend who's a guy because it's cool, we're having fun, we're in the water, and then you do it, and then you come up here, and now it's okay for you to be half naked in front of your friend when they're coming to pick you up to go out, and it's okay for you to walk out in your bra and undies when your male friends come to pick you up to go out. It's okay because 2 years ago, you would have never done that. But now you're okay with it. That's what creep is. The valuing, the wearing down of our values get taken more and more away because it's crept into our lives. We expose ourselves to it. And because of that, what happens is, in the same way, sex gets so eroded from us that we either make it so perverted, or we're so used to the perversion that we think it's okay, it's normal. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean don't have sex before you're married? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You've got to try it before you buy it. Hang on, did you just use a marketing slogan for your sex life? Is that what you just used? You've got to try it before you buy it? Do you even know what you're playing with? Let me show you. Let me show you what we're playing with. Let's go to the book of Mark, chapter 10. I'm going to talk more about that creep thing in a minute, not the person once again, but the creep factor, the creep principle, I'll call it. Mark chapter 10, verse 7 to 9, it says this, Jesus speaking, "For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate." Let me read that again, because this is important. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife. And the two shall become one flesh. So then they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. That shows us exactly what sex is right there. The purpose and the boundary of sex. The purpose of sex, listen to this, sex is a God joining of two human beings. What God has joined together, let not man separate. What did he join together? The two that became one flesh. What's he talking about? Let me think. One flesh. Sex. You realize that that's how two human beings become one. It's through sexual interaction. You become one through sexual interaction with your partner. That's what we're designed to be. As a matter of fact, the marriage institution and sex within the marriage is a perfect picture of God's relationship with humanity. That he betrothed humanity and marries humanity, and they have intimacy together. The Father wants to have intimacy with his bride, the church, and sex is a picture of that intimacy. Now, I'm not asking you to put your head in the gutter, because we're not talking about physical sex with God. We're talking about intimacy with God, spiritual intimacy with him, being interwound with him. And so that picture is such a beautiful picture that God has given us, that closeness and that oneness that is derived in your sexual interaction with your partner, with your husband or wife. That shows us the closeness that God wants to have with his bride. It's a beautiful picture of it. But what has society done? What has the world done? It's perverted that picture and taken the value away from what it is and said you can do it whenever you want with whomever you want. Not realizing that what it is a God joining of two human beings. As a matter of fact, before the ceremony of marriage was done, the way people back in the ancient times were considered to be married was when they consummated that marriage that night and had sex. That's when you were considered to be married. What has changed since then? Nothing. Except now, we've got a piece of paper, that's the legal side, and we've got a ceremony, that's the nice, lovely side. And we think that that's the marriage. No. By what God has done is the two shall become one. You leave your mother and father, so you become your own unit. You join with your wife. It says here. What does it say here? Bear with me. It just flipped over. It says that the two shall become one. So they're going to be joined. So they'll leave the mother and father and be joined to his wife. So they're married, or they connect together, and the two shall become one flesh. What's the first instruction God gave man and woman? What's the first thing he said to them? Be fruitful and multiply. What does that mean? Go play cards? No. The first thing God said to a man and woman is go have sex. See, we don't want to say this sometimes in church because it's awkward. God's talking about sex. Yeah, he created it. Sex is not a man's idea. We make it like as if it's our idea. It's a man's idea. It's a dirty idea. No, it's God's idea. And it's a wonderful idea at that. Why? Because sex is amazing. Sex is awesome. Sex is wonderful. If you think it's otherwise, I want everyone to repeat after me. Sex is wonderful. Geez, you're all awkward. Wow. Very awkward. All right, all the married couples then. All the married couples say sex is amazing. All right, all the single people say, I will wait for sex. Excellent. We can get so uptight about sex, not realizing this is a God idea. It has been stolen from the church and stolen from the people of God and made this massive thing, perverted out in the world, when really it's a God idea. We need to own this. We need to own this idea, this institution of sex. We need to own this institution of marriage. We need to own it. This is what mesmerizes me about some Christians who don't realize that marriage is a God idea, not a man idea. It wasn't until 1961 or 67 in Australia that marriage became a legal institution. And the only reason it became a legal institution was because the government needed to know what are our procreation rates, and what are our death rates and mortality rates and birth rates, and what are our, but we need there to be family, because family is the building block of society, and so we've got to protect it. And so let's make a legislation about it to protect the institution of marriage between one man and one wife, and let's go do that. And we think it's a legal thing. No, my friend, irrespective of what the legal definition is, that is what marriage is right there. One man, one woman, making kids. That's what it is. Now, are there differences to that? Do some couples find it difficult to have children? Of course they do. We understand that. That's what happens in life. We live in a fallen world, and that can happen. It doesn't mean they can't adopt children if they choose to. It doesn't mean they can't try other things to do that. I understand that, and that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the fact that sex is perverted by society, and we become so shunned by it because sex is such a dirty word out there. As a matter of fact, out there, it's not even dirty anymore. It's a commodity. Sex is now a commodity to trade with. Young men and women go out to clubs and trade with their bodies. That's how they interact with their bodies. When I've been to go out to have dinner at a place and you watch the young men and women interact, goodness me, it's a meat market. How they're dancing with each other, what's going on. Not that dancing's wrong. Please understand, I'm not saying dancing's wrong. What I'm saying is the way certain people are dancing with each other. Literally, there's 3 millimeters of clothing between them. Otherwise, it would be sex in the open. It's this commodity that's used. This asset that we just flaunt out there because it's mine and I can do with it what I want. It's my body. Isn't it the height of arrogance in humanity when we say the statement, it's my body, I can do what I want with it? Like, I made this thing. No, you realize it was given to you by someone. You realize that that body is not yours. You are borrowing this body while you're on this planet. And sex is being used as a commodity, but really it's a God joining. And there is a purpose and boundaries. The purpose is the God joining. The boundaries of sex is marriage, is a commitment between one man and one wife. And the reason for that, as he says there, a man will leave his mother and father, be joined to his wife, and look at the order, leave the mother and father, joined to the wife, we're married, and then the two shall become one flesh. It's not become one flesh, become one flesh, then leave the mother and father, or live in the basement, and then at some point we get married. At some point, you want that piece of paper? What's the use? I really love you. My friend, marriage, commitment is not about love, in love feelings. It's about saying, I am responsible for you. I am committed to you. Well, I can do that without the piece of paper. Yeah, you can. Yeah. Of course you can. So why don't you get married anyway? It drives me bananas when I sit with couples and after they've been dating for 3 to 5 years, wait till next week, sorting and courting. I'm going to fix that problem. And you ask one of the partners, hey, why don't you want to get, I don't know if I want to get married yet. I don't know means no. It's not brain surgery. As a matter of fact, brain surgery is not even brain surgery anymore. I don't know means no. Oh, do you want to get married? I don't know. That means no. You've been seeing this person for, I'll leave it till next week. Please don't get me started there. Next week, sorting and courting. You see, what we've done as a society is up until about the 60s and 70s, and I think it's important for us to know this. Up until about the 60s and 70s, sex was a subject that was hidden away from society's talking. We didn't really talk about it too much. And then all of a sudden the 60s and the 70s came out and the sexual revolution happened. and peace, make love, not war, and daisies in machine guns, and flower power and sex power, and I don't know, I wasn't born in the 60s, but some of you were, and so you know what I'm talking about. It was all free love, and let's all go to Woodstock and just have sex with anything that moved. If it didn't move, we pushed it and had sex with it. And so it doesn't matter. It was weird, and it started this revolution that happened in the 60s and 70s. And to be honest with you, sex before the sex industry, the porn industry, was a derelict industry before the 60s and 70s. It was this weird little industry, weird filmmakers that no one really took notice of, only for the weirdos that go buy these VHS beta videos and they'd go and watch them 8mm movies, and watch them in the back blocks of a house somewhere. And from the 60s and 70s, the porn industry skyrocketed. Because now we'd somehow released all of the shackles and the chains of old school thinking, and all the shackles and the chains that bound us and confound us and constricted us from having a free life. The biggest judgment man can have is to be given the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want. And in the 60s and 70s, that's what happened there. The removal of these ancient held views, this liberating ourselves from constraints and from Christian ideologies, and we don't need this, and sex is now just a biological act, just do it. And it skyrocketed so much, the sexualization of humanity skyrocketed so much in the Western world that the porn industry is now seen to have over $200 billion of revenue each year. And that's a educated guess by all of the world's governments to try and work out what the damage is that sex is doing to the industry. $200 billion is greater than Google, Microsoft, Yahoo, eBay, and Apple company revenues combined. That's Google. These are the biggest companies in the world. Microsoft, Yahoo, eBay, and Apple combined, their revenues, and the sex industry is estimated to be bigger than all of them. It's an industry that's only surpassed, possibly, by the military industry. The two biggest industries in humankind is how do we kill the flesh and how do we kill someone's soul? Isn't it interesting that a world that moves away from the Creator starts to destroy itself from within? An industry, a world, a humanity that doesn't understand who they are and what God has placed in them or where they came from starts to go to a place of self-destruction. And we think we are so elevated and so wonderful in our humanity, and we go, why do we have these issues? Why do we have sex trafficking? We should stop sex trafficking with children. Yeah, started off in pornography. This is where it starts. We don't have a demand. If there is no demand for men to have sex with children, there would be no trafficking industry. This is why I can't go to Cambodia. I'd be in jail within 3 minutes. I'd love someone all the way to heaven. I'd want them to meet their Creator very quickly after I introduced them to Jesus. I don't know if I can handle seeing a white 60-year-old male walking around holding the hands of a 10-year-old girl without wanting to snatch her off him and take her away. The disgusting, what has happened to this man that makes him think it's okay for you to have sex with a 10-year-old girl? What has happened to people that gets them to the place where they think it's okay to click on pornography and watch people have sex and think that that's not going to affect you? What part of humanity has been decimated? I'll tell you what part. Our identity has been decimated. Our sense of knowing who we are and who we belong to and what we're designed for. That's what's been decimated in us. And the power of sex has to be spoken about in church so that we understand what it is. If you still don't believe me that sex is very powerful, then all you've got to do is go speak to one of the young children that have been sexually abused. Go speak to a young child that has been sexually abused as a young child and wait until they grow up a little bit where they can articulate a little bit more of what happened to them, and ask them what it was like growing up being sexually abused. Then tell me that sex doesn't have any power on someone. These beautiful young people that have been abused sexually who grow up into their 20s and 30s and still dealing with the effects of being abused sexually. Trying to walk through life. Some people, without God, have had decades, 50 years. I've spoken to someone who come to know God in their 60s but was sexually abused when they were 10, between 10 and 17 or 10 and 15. I don't remember the details completely, but they were in their 60s when they found the Lord, and they were sharing with me the 50 years of effects of being abused for those 5 years of life. So the question becomes, at what age does sex no longer have that power? The answer is never. Sex has that power on humanity for the rest of our lives. Hang on, we may get a bit older and can process that sexual encounter a little more. We may get a bit older and be able to articulate the pain a little more, and the open breaking of trust that's happened. We might be able to sort of think it away. But I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, sex still has the same impact as it does to a 10-year-old as it does to a 40-year-old. It has the same impact, the same trust, the same openness. All of that is part of interacting sexually with someone else. It just so happens that a young person doesn't know how to articulate these things, doesn't know how to process this information properly, and therefore is rewired in a perverted way. And so, if sex still has this power over us, and sex still has this hold over humanity, then why are we not talking about it more in church to let our young people know, and even our married people know, what sex really is about? You see, you've got to understand, with sex, if you don't do the purpose, but it's in the right boundary, it still has an adverse effect on humanity. Let me say that again. You might be having sex in the right boundary in marriage, but you're not using it for the right purpose. It has an adverse effect on that marriage. The purpose of marriage is a God joining and a oneness. The two shall become one. And so in marriage, if sex isn't used to create oneness, but it's used for my pleasure as lust, you are there to pleasure me, that breaks down the oneness of what it is in a marriage. It breaks down the oneness. For instance, no, I won't go for instances. I'll hold off on for instances. Let me put it this way. If you and your partner are running a race, and your finish line is a lot closer than your partner's, and you run the race and you decide, the ribbon's broken, yay, I've finished the race, and you don't realize that your partner's race is not over yet, and you decide to walk off the track and go home. Did I say that okay? Was that okay? Is that all right? All the young people are thinking, now we're talking about athletics? What's happening? The funny thing is, they know more than you. That's the funny part, right? They know exactly what I'm talking about. We know what you're talking about, Pastor Jordan. That tears away at the oneness in the marriage, because that's taking what you want and thinking, it's over for me, I got what I want, and you walk off. Whereas there is no oneness being created, because God says the two shall become one flesh. That's a togetherness. That's a joining that has to happen. So there needs to be an intimacy that says, I give to you. We read last week that our body is not our own. Paul says our body belongs to our partner, and their body belongs to me. Do not separate that unless you're in an agreement, and you're only doing it in agreement to go and pray and fast, but don't do it for too long so that you're not falling into temptation. And so our body is not ours. So it's not, when you have intimacy with your partner, it's not about you just getting what you want. It's about thinking of the other person. It's about love and commitment towards them in every aspect of the relationship. And husbands, if you are doing that, please stop. It's now becoming very awkward. Wives, don't nudge your husbands here. Please stop doing that. Stop and talk to your wife. Have an honest conversation. Don't take it personally. If she says, yeah, what Pastor George said today, that's what you do. What does Pastor George know? A lot more than you right now. That's just for sure. Stop and don't let that sense of taking and lust destroy your marriage or the oneness of your marriage. You know how it creeps in, right? You know how it creeps into the marriage is because there's been some sort of form of either pornography before we get into marriage, or masturbation destroys the fabric of marriage, or never been spoken of or told or educated in the house of God about what it is. That's how it creeps in to the marriage. And so what happens is sex becomes so taboo, we don't talk about it, and now we all got to try and figure it out. We get married because I'm a good Christian boy, and I get married and I don't have sex before I'm married, and so I get into this room with this person that's now become my wife because some guy, pastor, said she's my wife, and now I go, hey, what do I do? Well, what happens? What are the rules? I don't know. So when I do pre-marriage counseling, we talk about sex. We teach them what it was like. You know what our lesson was? Our lesson was by this couple who were very awkward in telling us, this is 22 years ago. We've been married 22 years this coming Friday. Happy anniversary, darling. Happy anniversary. Woohoo! That's my daughter. Yeah, woo! I know. That's how you were made. It's awesome. What's going on? And let me tell you, jokes aside, I want to teach my children about sex, not TV, not their friends. I don't want my 14-year-old boy learning about sex from his derelict 14-year-old friend. I want him learning it from me through the Word of God. Does it take an awkward conversation? Yeah. I had to have an awkward conversation with my 12-year-old daughter, and I used the toilet paper roll to explain what sex was. Your virginity. I've explained this here before, haven't I? The toilet paper roll? Yeah, okay, good. I don't have to go again. And so, but the conversation had to happen. And today she's 17, almost 18, and she still remembers that conversation from 6 years ago. Because it impacted her. It was the first conversation she'd had. Oh, Dad, I don't want to talk about it. You're awkward. Great. But we're talking about it. Otherwise, she would have learnt it from her friends. And she was learning it from her friends. And your kids are the same. They need to see the beautiful oneness of what sex is and the intimacy that it develops and why it needs to be within marriage. Just telling our young people, you shouldn't have sex before you're married, doesn't fly anymore. Neither does, you're going to hell if you have sex before you get married. Not necessarily. You will definitely get pregnant if you have sex before. Not true. You're going to get a STD if you have sex before. Not necessarily true. And so all of these old arguments that we used to have that were scare tactics don't work. What does work is giving someone, arming them with the reasons why, and showing them the power of what God has done and why He's put it within the confines of marriage. And so, if we don't have the purpose of sex within the boundaries of marriage proper, then sex doesn't become a blessing to a couple, it becomes a burden. It becomes a burden. It should never been a burden. Otherwise, if it was going to be a burden, God would have just done the whole egg thing. Pop an egg out, you sit on it for 9 months, that's what happens. But it's not that. There's an intimacy that's created and a oneness. Go with me to 1 Corinthians. I read this last week, and I want to go through this today, and then we're going to have some questions answered. questions answered, Jerry? Just check with me with Ruth, please, and then we'll go through that. In 1 Corinthians 6, let's read it from there. And let's go through. I want to break this down for you. 1 Corinthians 6:13, it says, foods for the stomach and the stomach for foods, but God will destroy both it and them. Now the body is not for sexual immorality, but for the Lord, and the Lord for the body. And God both raised up the Lord and will raise us up by his power. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take a member of Christ and make them a member with a harlot or a prostitute? Certainly not. Do you not know that he who is joined to a harlot is one body with her? For the two, he says, shall become one flesh. Do you see how it's a God joining? Do you see how it's a God joining there? It's a joining of two people. So what that means is, if you've had sex with multiple people, there's a lot of joining that's happened. Now, I don't necessarily believe that this concept of soul ties is something that is, how do I say this? I believe that the authority that God has given us can break things and curses and bondages over our life a lot quicker than what we think has to happen. I believe the authority of God, what Jesus Christ did on the cross, and when he said, it is finished and all authority has been given to me, now go. If we're walking in God's authority, then walking in his authority means we need to change this and this to activate the authority God has given us. And once we change this and this, we walk in his authority. There's not a lot that has to happen besides, no, I'm no longer tied to anyone. I don't longer have generational curses. I no longer have we're broken from these things. Do you need to pray about them? Yes, you do. Do you need to take some time, if you haven't believed it before, to walk in it? Yes, you do. But once you lock into that belief that you have God's authority in you, it's done. That's how it works in God. Otherwise, do we have to crucify Christ every time we do something wrong, or every time we can't get through something? Jesus, you need to get back up on the cross. Didn't work the first time. Let's try it again. No. Even Paul says that. But if it's a God joining, then that shows us the power of what sex is. It shows us how you become one member with this person. Verse 17. But he who is joined to the Lord is one spirit with him. Now stop for a minute. That word joined in verse 17 is same as the word joined in verse 16, is same as the word joined in you shall leave your mother and father and be joined to your wife. That's the same word that says in God, whatever God has joined, it's all the same word. Joined. So it's showing us here what Paul is saying to the Corinthians and to us is that the same joining that happens with the Lord in spirit is what happens in the flesh with humanity. It's that same God joining that happens. So don't join with people that you're not married to, because it's the same joining as you are with the Lord. It's an intimate, deep joining. Verse 18, flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own, for you were bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. As disciples of Jesus Christ, as ones who are in covenant relationship with him, all humanity is meant to do this, but as those who are in covenant relationship with Jesus, we honor God with our body, not just our lips and our words. We honor him with our body. How do we do that? By the way we live our life, to stay away from sexual immorality. Now, here's the clincher for me with this word, sexual immorality. I had a leader that I was leading about 15 years ago, and a really strong disciple of Jesus Christ, and someone who believed in not having sex before marriage and knew all the reasons why. And then he got a girlfriend. His early 20s. And then he realized, uh-oh. So he came to see me and he said, Pastor George, I'm reading the Bible and it says flee from sexual immorality. Does the Bible say that, does that mean that I can't have sex before marriage? But does that mean sexual immorality means sexual intercourse? Is that all it is, just the intercourse part? And I said, what? But what do you mean? He said, well, everything up until then's okay, right? I nearly fell over. I said, hang on. What do you mean? He said, well, I mean, it's okay to touch. How do I say it? It's okay. What's that little kids game at school? It's okay to play show and tell. Yeah, that's that okay? No, it's not okay. That's not. What do you mean by this? So I went through and I was trying to show him what it was, and I realized that the word sexual immorality is the Greek word porneia. Porneia is the word that we use for pornography. The word porneia means any sexual activity outside of marriage between one man and one woman. So it says flee sexual immorality. What it's saying is flee sexual activity outside of one man and one woman in the bounds of marriage. So I then wanted to figure out how do I teach young people where the bounds are? How do I teach them where it is that the bounds are? Where does this start? And because, young people, everything's open. It's like, okay, well, my definition of it is this, and your definition of it is that, so I tried to come up with something they can understand. That's where my message, Sex is Like Weka Road, started. It was because I was trying to teach young people where the line is. And I won't talk fully about that message today, but basically it was, let's use the stage as an example. Let's say this side of the stage is intercourse, sexual intercourse. Let's say this is this side of the stage. And there is a line that comes all the way to this side of the stage, and this is the start of what we would call sexual activity or sexual immorality. So what is the start? If that's the end there, then what is the start? Well, let's work backwards, and that's the intercourse side, and there might be some other extracurricular activities that you're doing leading up to there, and it just sort of, and there's another one over here, and then at this sort of corner of this street, or this part, there's another one here, there's another one there, and so the Bible tells us not to turn in towards sexual immorality. It tells us to flee sexual immorality. Don't turn down the street of sexual immorality. It says turn away from it. Why? Because youthful lusts, no matter how old you are very hard to combat once the train has started the engine and it's starting to leave the station. It's hard to stop a train when it's moving. And so you turn around and you flee immorality, not go towards it. So I started telling the young people, how are you fleeing immorality when there's a whole lot of touching and exploring and feeling and until we get to intercourse. How is that fleeing? Isn't that running towards it? So therefore, if all of these things are part of sexual activity that we need to flee from, then what is the start of it? What makes me turn down this road and head towards the intercourse? What makes me go down this sexual immorality path? And that's where the question, this thing popped up on the screen that I was doing. And great question. And the answer, I believe, is anything that makes you feel sexually active is the start of the street. For some people, that's heavy kissing. It starts the engine. If your engine starts running, then you've already started to turn down that street. And so what we need to do is flee sexual immorality. Now, this is for people who aren't in a marriage, right? So young people, older people, whatever your age is, it doesn't matter. If you're not married, then you don't want to turn down the street. If you're married, turn down the street as many times as you want. It's okay. That street's open. Fantastic. It's a wide highway. Go. It's okay. Go as fast as you can. It's an Autobahn in Germany, 500 kilometers an hour. It doesn't matter. But when you're not married, then you don't turn down this street. Whatever it is starts the engine, that's where you've got to pull back. That's where you've got to go, okay, it's too far. Because you realize something about a street, right? That when you drive down the street, if you stop here and you get out and go visit your friend at their house here, when you come back out of the house, you don't start at the start of the street, you start back here, don't you, where you stopped. And if you drive down a bit further and you visit this friend, then when you come out of that house, you start back here, you don't start back there. In the same way, in a relationship and in sexual conduct, wherever you stopped the last time is where you'll start the next time. And so this is what shocks me about people who say to me, I don't know how it happened, Pastor George. I went to go get milk and I ended up sleeping with this woman. I don't know how it happened. I tripped and fell over. What? You realize that where you started the relationship and where you went at, that's what got you there. The openness and the things like that. And so as I spoke through those things, young people started to realize, and people started to realize, oh, goodness me. But in the same vein, if you're married, then sexual morality to you is starting to turn down the road of looking at another person. Starting to turn down the road of gently touching the other person like, turning down the road of clicking on the wrong things. Oh, no, I'm powerful enough. I'll search this thing on like I want to make my sex life great with my wife, so I'm gonna Google sex life, make sex life great. No, that's not dangerous at all. That should be fine. Turning down the street towards anything that starts that, whether you're married or not, that's what needs to, if it's outside of the marriage institution, that's what needs to be pulled back. That's the power of sex. We're all freaking out about the power of sex, thinking that sex is dirty. It's wonderful. It's amazing. It's great. God has created it for us to be able to partake of it within marriage. So therefore, for those who have chosen not to be married, or for those who are single again, or for those who are single for the first time, and you're hearing me talk about sex, that doesn't mean I'm saying to you, oh, poor you miss out. That's not what I'm saying. Please understand that. If you've chosen to be single, if you feel like God's called you to be single, that's the cross you've got to bear. Trust me, some married people here are bearing crosses. And so, please don't take what I'm saying to you, and I wanted to make sure I said this today, that what I'm saying to you means that you as a single person are missing out from this amazing, amazing thing, and poor you. No, that's for the confines of marriage, for the purpose of oneness between two people. Your oneness, your intimacy comes between your connection with you and God, as it should with every individual. Every individual. This is why sex should never just be a physical act. Sex is not just physical. Sex is a deep emotional and spiritual connection between two humans. And so if I am one with God and I'm experiencing intimacy with God the Father, then I can come to my marriage institution whole. And I don't just take, I give. And that's what we should be. We should be whole with God, and intimacy needs to be from God. What we don't realize is we think that our partner needs to be all of these things for us. You need to be my companion. You need to be my best friend. You need to be my lover. You need to be my these things. And I need to take from you, and you need to give me, and you need to give me. No, that's not what they're designed for. You were designed as a helper for them. We were designed to be together. We're co-equals with the Lord. We work together. So I lift her, she lifts me. I serve her, she serves me. My body's not mine, her body's not hers. That's how it works. And so in this vein, I want you to understand that sex is powerful. It is beautiful, but it has purpose and it has boundaries. Amen? Let's go with the questions. Thank you for sending in questions. What? Oh, here we go. Straight away. What is your opinion on masturbation? Does masturbation before or after marriage destroy the fabric of marriage? Yes, yes, and yes, it does. For those who don't know what masturbation is, ask your parents. But I can guarantee you, your 10-year-old knows what it is already, okay? Now, people have said to me, well, George, it is scientifically proven that masturbation is great for the body as a health, for health reasons. That's true. I've seen the scientific research on that. But it's not healthy for you psychologically, and it's not that healthy for you spiritually. And the reason is, in order to do this, there has to be a thought life that follows it, which always ends up in a very unhealthy scenario. I had a Year 12 guy at a school that I was speaking about, and this question came up. And he put his hand up and he said, well, George, I don't agree with what you're saying. I said, why is that? He said, because what if I can masturbate by thinking about a tree? Brother, sex is your least of your problems. You got some psychological issues, mate. It's the least of your problems. You need to go get help. Now, he was being facetious, of course, and trying to say that if my thought life stayed pure, is it okay? The problem is your thought life doesn't stay pure. Because that's the nature and the power of what sexual activity is. Because it's like a drug. Whatever I need now in order to do this, I'm going to need more in order to do the same. If you understand what I mean. I need to feed the beast more in order to achieve the same high. And so if we go down the path of living a life like this, then we're robbing from ourselves, and it takes away from the oneness of marriage. It takes away from the oneness. Scientists have also shown us, and psychologists have shown us that what masturbation does before and after marriage is it rewires your brain for satisfaction. It rewires your brain for how you can relate intimately with another human being. It rewires it for the negative, not the positive. So it's not a great thing to do, trust me. Next one. If you're engaged to be married, is it okay to have sex? I get this question quite a lot. Here's my answer to this question. Why? If you are engaged to be married, why can you not wait? Or why does your partner not wait until the marriage happens? Because we have to draw a line somewhere. There has to be a line somewhere, because otherwise what we do is we blur lines. This is what we do as humans. We go, well, I'm engaged to be married. Why can't I have sex here? Well, I'm committed to this person, so why can't I have sex here? Well, I really love this person. Why can't I have sex here? And the line just keeps moving. Well, I just met them, but I think they're beautiful, and I think I've fallen in love at first sight. Why can't I have sex here? Well, we're both adults, and we've just met at the club, and she's a great dancer. I want to have sex with her. Well, I like his shoulders, and I want to have sex with him. Like, these are the lines. That's the justification and how much it gets. So there has to be a line, and the line is the confines of marriage. And in the traditional, in the sense of what it is in our culture right now, marriage is that moment you stand before the Lord and you say, we're married, sign the document, this is marriage. And so wait until you get married. So you know, to me, the way I see it is sexual immorality. And by the way, just because you're engaged doesn't mean you're going to get married. That's the other thing. Trust me. I've met with hundreds of engaged couples. Not all of them got married. I'm talking within a few days of being married, they pull the pin. And so wait until you're married. And what it does, by the way, it gives you as disciples of Christ the ability to have the moral authority to be able to talk about this later on and say, no, it is possible. We went through the tough times, me and my partner, but we waited until we got married. And so it is possible. Yes, it was tough. Yes, we made sure that we didn't go to certain places and be under the blanket at 2 o'clock in the morning watching a movie and thinking nothing was going to happen. We put boundaries around our lives in order to make sure. Now, obviously, if you're engaged and the closer you get to marriage, the harder it is. So you've got to put more boundaries in place. But I believe you should wait until you get married. And that shows your commitment towards the other person and towards the Word of God. Next. I am the wife of an Arab pastor. Um, I'll get back to you on that one, darling. I don't know what's happening. I don't know how it's working, but I'd like to get on with my life. Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you, darling. I appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, Anonymous. Sorry. Thank you, Anonymous. Thank you. Next. Where is the line in marital sex? Sex is fun, but what is too far or off limits? Excellent. Excellent. Excellent question. For those of us who are married here today, like I said a moment ago, sex is about oneness. Sex is about a God joining. And so therefore, actually, a few years ago, quite a few years ago, probably when I first gave my life to God, about 2 years in, this German preacher came to the church I was in Sydney, and he decided to talk about, he was very awkward when he was talking about relationship and sex. And what he mentioned was, he said, okay, the only way to have sex, and he gave us a rhyme. I'm going to try and remember it. It was something like nose to nose, lip to lip, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. He said nose to nose, lip to lip, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. And I went, okay, how boring is your sex life? Like, really? This is it? That's the only way you can do this? This is it? That's all you can do? And it became such a constraint. And I don't know where he got this idea from, because when I read it in the Bible, it's about a oneness, it's about a togetherness. So what you've got to do is, what is too far and what is off limits is dictated by you and your partner. Now, there are certain things that are definitely off limits. You don't watch pornography with your partner and have sex. I know some of you go, oh, you just said that? Yeah. Some people do that. Quite a few people do that, and it's not good for the marriage. It's not good for the marriage. Do not do that. Obviously, there are certain parts of our body that are exit holes and should remain that way. That's all I'll say about it. I know some of us don't like saying that, but if we don't talk about it, pornography is teaching our young people, our people. Some of us, pornography has taught you, and you're 40. And this is what happens in relationship. Sometimes, I've listen to me, this is how disgusting it is. I've sat in a room with a couple who the husband is Christian, is asking the wife why she's not okay having a third person in the marriage bed with him. I felt like punching that guy through that wall. Like, I just didn't even know how to respond to this idea. And after a few questions, it was obvious he got the idea from pornography. And so obviously there are limits to that oneness. There are limits to the bounds of what you've got to do, but it's only within making sure that oneness is not torn. And if you want to do something and your partner is not wanting or comfortable to do it, do not force that on them. That's tearing away at the oneness and the one flesh and the intimacy and the God connection between you. And so the limits and the too far is obviously what I just mentioned a moment ago, but also anything that tears away at the oneness. It may not be wrong to do, but if the partner is not interested in it, don't go there. Next question, if there is one. What physical actions would you classify as sex? Maybe I'll answer that on Facebook. Like I said a moment ago, anything that starts, and I wouldn't just say sex, I'd say sexual activity. Anything that starts the engine running. Because whatever starts the engine running, and I hope you know what I mean by that, is the feeling of sexual arousal. Whatever starts that, you're already starting down the line of sexual conduct. That's where it starts. You don't just go from zero to intercourse. That's not how it works, people. You're not just watching TV, then boom, you're there. If that's what you do to your partner, sit down and have a talk to him, please. But there is a line that you go down. And God has created it, again, for intimacy. So as a young person, or as a single person, anything that starts that arousal, that's what you need to flee from. Isn't it funny that the Bible says flee from sexual immorality? Don't fight it. Everything else, stand, be firm, be strong, allow the authority of God when it comes to sexual immorality. Run from it. Don't you find that interesting? Why can't I stand and pray against it? Father, I pray against this feeling of sexual arousal. I stand against it in the name of Jesus. Doesn't work. Why? Because God knows the power of it. He created it. He tells you, pull yourself out of this situation. Don't be in the situation. You can't be watching a pornographic movie praying that Jesus heal this, get rid of this arousal. You can't be under a doona with your partner and you're single and you're praying, God, don't let me be sexually aroused right now. It's too late. You can be Superman, Jesus, rolled into one. You're still going to fail because it's what happens. It's what we're designed to be. That's why he says flee from it. Don't even go down that road. Get away from it. Were there any other questions or was that it? Is there one more? In my class, there was a kid who was obsessed with porn, and he says gross stuff. My friends don't know much about sex, so they are learning about sex from a person obsessed with porn. I'm in the 7th grade. What can I do? Do you see what I mean, church? Do you understand what I mean now? This is someone here or watching us on Facebook Live that has sent in this question, and they're in 7th grade. How old are a 7th grader? 12. And there is a porn-obsessed person who is teaching all of them about sex. Yet we get awkward about talking about it. You realize that this young person, probably the first time they've ever heard about sex in this way is right now. Right now. And everything I'm saying is in absolute contradiction to what this young person is saying in their classroom. Because this young person is saying gross stuff about sex and what it's meant to be. What happens is this generation and generations that have gone before us, and some of us that have been affected by it, see what we see on porn and hear from our friends and think all of these actions and all of these things that we watch are normal. And then we go into our marriage life as a Christian thinking that why doesn't my wife or husband want to do those things? That's normal. No, it's not normal. It's a perversion of what sex is. Nothing about pornography is about oneness. It's all about debased human instinct, or what we call instinct, that's really against everything that God created it to be. Totally the antithesis. So to answer this question, what can I do about it? Well, young person, first I want to say thank you so much for writing this question, is whoever this young person is. If you're on Facebook Live, you're in the room. Thank you for having the courage to say that and for talking, for bringing it up. I want you to know that everything that your friend is saying about pornography is absolutely wrong. That's not what God designed it to be. It's not what it's meant to be like. It was never designed to be this way. So let me just know, and I think you realize that, hence why you asked the question. The only thing that you can do is have the ability that if someone is to bring this stuff up to you, is to block it. You may not be able to change your friends' minds, and I'm not asking you to go and preach about sex at the age of 12 into your classmates, but if your classmates do ask you questions, don't be afraid to say, no, look, I believe that sex was created by God because it's so powerful, He's asked us to use it within marriage. That sex, oh yeah, and will you get ridiculed? Of course. Anyone in the public life, anyone in workplace, you say that no, I'm not having sex until I'm married, they go, really? Wow, good for you. That's the answer, and that's an older person. So for you, 7th grader, just know what sex is, what you've heard today. Ask questions. Know more about it. Become more knowledgeable about what God has designed it for. And then, when it does come your way, when your friends do ask you, when your friends say this stuff to you, that, man, what little Johnny is saying is so disgusting, you can then counteract it with, well, that's because Johnny's got it wrong. Sex is actually something that God gave us so that a man and woman can be close and be joined together as one in marriage. However you want to say that in that sense, but you can say that in a way that counteracts what little Johnny is saying. I'm not asking you to preach that to your classmates, but if they do come to you, if they're disgusted by what little Johnny's saying, then you've got the ability to say, here's some truth about it. Okay? Are there any more questions before we go? There's one more. When I tell non-Christians I saved sex for marriage, they often get uncomfortable. Yes. What else should I say to get them thinking that it is actually a positive thing? Look, I think in the same vein for you, our job is not to convince every single person that sex is for marriage. Our job is not to lay down the law and tell them they're all horrible people. That if I can have the music team back, thank you guys. You're horrible, you're stupid for having sex before marriage. This is the culture we live in now. The culture is that sex is prevalent and that's what you do, and you can do it whenever you want and however you want. And the problem with that is that we have severe breaking of trust, because you understand that sex is a deep, intimate level of trust. Deep level of intimate of trust that has to happen between a couple. And so if that trust is worn away and broken, like for instance, here's the other reason, before I fully answer this, or actually as I'm answering it, the question before about having sex before we're married. Here's the other reason to this, is that if you have sex before you're in the commitment of marriage, you've opened yourself up to the person, especially for women who feel their emotions a lot more than men. Men think they don't feel them, but actually comes out in anger. It comes out in anger when their trust has been broken or they've been disrespected. It comes out in anger. And so what do you mean by that, George? Well, if I'm having sex with a partner that's not my husband or wife, then I am completely giving myself and opening up myself to them. And so there's an enormous amount of trust that I've given this person. And because there's no commitment that encircles this trust, there's no full commitment that encircles this trust, then what happens is I become a little wary when they're starting to talk to other people from the opposite sex. Who's that texting you? Who's that calling you? Why are you talking to that girl or that guy? Why? And this trust starts to wear away, and let alone if they go and, why does it hurt so much when they go and cheat on you and sleep with someone else? Why? It's not because they slept with someone else, it's because they broke your trust. They tore away at the very thing. I gave you my complete intimacy and you just threw it on the ground. And so before you're married, what's happening is, and I've seen this with Christian couples so many times where they couldn't hold themselves, and so they had sex before they got married, and then they realized, why do I have trust issues in my marriage? Let's go back to before you got married. That's where it started. Because that trust is broken when you open yourself up and there's no commitment, and you sort of go, are we together? As a matter of fact, this is why so many people stay in relationships that's not good for them, because of that connection that they've had with sex, that oneness, and they stay in this oneness. They stay in this relationship and the oneness has been torn because of trust issues, but they stay there because that relationship, man, I had sex with him and I gave him my intimacy and I gave him my life and I opened up my life to him and I can't leave. And that's what happens. That's all because of the physical sex. You don't want sex. You don't want sex to be the reason why you get married. Marriage is hard. Marriage is difficult. Sex is great, but marriage is difficult. But you've got to work on these things. And so why do we allow sex to be the reason why we get married? Either because I want to have sex, or because I had sex before I got married. Now I'm intimately connected with this person and I don't know how to let go. So we might as well get married. Ooh. What a bad situation. So for this person, the only way you can make it positive is by taking what we've said today and summarizing that. Once again, look, I believe that sex is a God gift to humanity to be used within the confines of marriage, because it's so powerful and it connects us and makes us one with the person we're having sex with. So that's what I believe. That's what you say. Simple as that. And most people don't know how to respond to that, because they don't hear it anywhere. But all your job is to plant that seed and let God do what he needs to do in there.